Emptiness is something that in our culture, and the culture I grew up in at least, is considered something very painful, something shameful, something unwanted. I know in various points in my life I experienced what felt like a great deal of emotional emptiness, and that was a state that went with depression, meaninglessness, a sense of lacking purpose or vitality, a sense of flatness in my relationships with the world. And so emptiness is something really unwanted or undesirable. It's almost a state of the hyper-Western mind that's totally cut off from any source of meaning and just exists in this existentially vapid, vacant reality that's empty. I had this experience in a personal trance, talking to a long ago ancestor who I approached and just asked, what is my purpose? What's the best way to live a purposeful life? And that ancestor was very dismissive of the entire notion of purpose and said essentially it's kind of a colonizer mentality, this idea that you have to have some kind of purpose to life. And what he instead pointed towards is that life is about being empty, but not empty in that painful way, but empty being like a bowl that's empty, that's open, that has so much space to be filled by so many things, and that the work isn't to know exactly what I'm going to put in that bowl and make sure only those things are in that bowl, but to be open to what life wants to put in my bowl, what life has to offer me. I found this very liberating, and it's something that I continue to return to and explore, even though there are still parts of me that want some sense of purpose. But there's a lot of depth, I think, to that, whether you take value in my trance visions or not. I do think there was a wisdom that this ancestral vision was offering me. When I live with this sense of purpose, or I think I have to have a purpose, it really puts so much emphasis on this sort of conscious doer, kind of left brain, sort of heroic, like I have to know what my purpose is and I have to do it, and I can't possibly be happy or fulfilled unless I know I'm doing my purpose. And I have no doubt that people have gotten value out of that. I know in my life there have been times I've gotten value out of it. I know for me, even that sense of purpose is important for my work, that when I worked in a job that was just about checking a box or doing some editing, that I felt sort of bored and empty in the negative sense, and I felt that sense of purposelessness. That is different than when I'm in the work I'm doing now that has a lot of meaning for me. That feels very alive. It's not always easy. It doesn't mean every day is like a joyful celebration. Some days are just hard, some days are just work. But more often than not, each day is interesting to me and enlivening, and there's something deeply meaningful to me about that. So purpose is still important to some extent. At the same time, emptiness, it just feels so relieving to imagine that it's okay to just be empty, to just be open and to not know, and to be open to this idea that life is giving me things that I don't have to know exactly what's going on. I think our anxious parts, my anxious parts, really want to have that sense of knowing and control, which is tied to this sense of purpose, this idea that somehow I'm supposed to know exactly what's going to happen next week, and in 5 years, and in 10 years, and that I need to be able to steer the ship to get there, and I need to know exactly what steps I'm going to take, and if any of that changes or goes out of my control, then I have tension, I have anxiety, I'm terrified, I have this fear I'm just going to lose everything. It's really a rigid fixation on order, whereas emptiness really just opens up to possibility, which some might describe as chaos, but chaos is also possibility. It's this field of things that are happening, of potentials, and that's as much a part of life and the world we live in as order. there's no doubt that when we move into things with intention, and that when we have a clear kind of alignment with our centers and that our energy is moving forward, things happen, things coincide, there's synchronicities, there's this sense of I am moving along this path that was laid out for me or that I laid out, and everything's lining up to support me, and that feels amazing. That feels that higher level of spiritual purpose, that sense of all these spirits are aiding me on this path. And at the same time, stuff happens. Accidents happen, mistakes happen, people come into your life and they change the course of your life. Things happen, you lose things, people leave your life that change the course of your life. Not all of these things are within our control. And they might not all even be governed by some kind of spiritual force. Or if you want, there could be many spiritual forces kind of competing for influence in your life. So sometimes you're walking in a current that's the wind's at your back, and sometimes the wind's coming from a different angle. And you can try to keep on your path, and that's value. But also you have to be open to making adjustments. Otherwise you're going to have a really hard path. And there may be times when the wind's against you, and you either need to reconsider or just take a break and wait for the winds to change. And I think that's as much a part of emptiness as anything else, is that sense of just being open and just being kind of watching what's coming my way, what's happening today, who's showing up. And that doesn't mean I have to accept everything that shows up or be okay with how everything happens. You know, there might be people or things that show up that are just, those aren't acceptable to me, that it's not a relationship I want to have, this isn't a way I want to be treated, and I can choose not to have that. But it's not this sense of rigidity, it's not this sense of I have to be doing something, that I'm not having a purpose if I'm not influencing the world in this particular way or living out this mission in a particular way. It really allows other parts of us to emerge, because we're not all just mission driven. Some parts of us are mission driven and they should get their time, but some parts of us just want to play. Some parts of us just want to be and lay and love and be loved. And there's value in that. I recently came down with an illness that knocked me out for about a week. And up until that point, I was very geared towards this goal I have that I may still pursue. It's in a week or week and a half, but it requires sort of a physical fitness that I was working towards. And then this illness just knocked me on my butt. And there were 3 or 4 days where I was just kind of laying, watching TV, playing Zelda, not really doing a whole lot. And that was good. That was good for me, it was good for my body. My body really needed the rest. If I'd kept pushing myself, then I could have aggravated the illness and possibly made things more complicated. There's of course some fear and anxiety that maybe I'm going to lose all these gains I made, but that's also possible. And so maybe I won't be able to do the thing in a week and a half, but that doesn't change that I got sick, whether I feel good or bad about it, whether I do this thing or don't do this thing. The illness was just something that happened. It was chaotic, and instead of kind of rigidly trying to push through, I just had to accept this is where I'm at. And it's something that I kind of enjoy. I don't like being sick, but something that's kind of nice or interesting about being sick is when you can really have, if you really have the privilege and the support where you can just rest, it really feels like a journey into the underworld. I was thinking of it like Inanna's, the descent of Inanna, where she goes to visit her sister in the underworld, and there are 7 gates where she stopped at every gate, and they ask her to take off some attribute of her power, her breastplate, her necklace, her jewelry. Inanna is a divinity, a queen of heaven, and she's coming and humbling herself to go into the underworld, but they force her to humble herself even more. And then her sister ends up striking her dead and hanging Inanna's body on a hook for 3 days until Inanna is resuscitated and rescued by a plan she put in place just in case, because she kind of knew what she was getting into. This is, you know, a myth, obviously, and it's pretty dark, and that's a very high-level summary. But I think kind of being in a state of illness, like a deep depression or sickness, can feel like that being on the hook, like that being stripped of everything that seemed important, that seemed valuable or joyful, setting aside all these plans you made and just having to surrender to being just a body that's sick, a body that needs rest, a body that needs to be. And then when that body finally is restored to health or starts reapproaching health, it's interesting to come back into life and start picking up those old pieces of purpose again and just kind of like looking at them like, what is the purpose of this? Which just brings us back to this sort of soft, empty openness where there's so much about life that's just about being and just being alive. And there's a lot of value we bring to ourselves and each other's just by our presence, by our being, but also we don't need to bring value to anybody. Bringing value is something that we do for work, for community status. You know, it's a part of being social, so nothing wrong with it. But also at the basic level, we're just here. We don't have to justify our existence. You know, whether I provide value or not, I'm still here. I'm still a body, I'm still a human being. And maybe I try on these things, I do these projects and these goals, and that brings a lot of vitality to my life. But also that isn't the wholeness of who I am. It's just something I'm doing with myself while I'm here. And coming back to emptiness is just really being in that kind of mysterious expanse that's reminds me that I'm just way more than what I do and who I am to people, and that there's something larger. There really is kind of a larger force that's offering life to me, maybe in a personal way, maybe in a way that there's something special being given to me, but also it doesn't even have to be that personal or that special. I think the Western celebration of the hero is a little overstated. It's too much. It's exhausting, and it kind of creates all this discord of all these people who see the world as something to be heroically overcome or resisted, when the world just is what it is. And when we are empty and open, there's so much beauty in it, and there's so much joy, and there's just so much ease that happens that we can contact the largeness of ourselves, the largeness, I'm going with it, the largeness of ourselves that isn't defined by these particular roles. So I'm just finding myself wanting to take a moment, just invite you to breathe into this emptiness with me. And just by noticing the space that is around you, the emptiness of the space in which you're in, even if there's clutter or it's tight, there's some space that your body is in that it allows you to be in. If this space were totally dense and full, then we couldn't physically be here. Just the way silence gives shape to noise, and that you couldn't hear sounds if there wasn't silence that allowed those sounds to move to your ears. And just noticing everything within you that comes with purpose and resonates with intention and desire. And just invite that to feel the spaciousness, to feel how there's all this room just to be, and there's nothing to change, just for this moment. And there's all these possibilities, all these things your body can do in this space or with this space, all these ways the space could be filled or emptied. And see if you can feel that in you too, that spaciousness within even the tiniest bit of space, of emptiness. See if you can breathe into that emptiness. And just let all of yourself take in more of that space. Nothing has to stop. None of your purpose has to end or change. Your anxiety doesn't have to surrender to chaos. But just let it feel that there's room, that there's possibility. And have a great day.